The autumn sun hung low over Cedar Hollow, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. A chill wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and the promise of an early winter. Most of the town's residents were already inside, preparing dinner or settling in for the evening. But 5 teenagers stood at the edge of the old woods, staring at a path that most people pretended didn't exist. "This is stupid," Jess said, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. Her dark eyes darted toward the forest, then back to the group. "We should just go to the movies like normal people." "Where's the fun in that?" Mike grinned, his confidence as bright as ever. He'd been the one to suggest this little adventure, and backing out now wasn't in his nature. "Come on, it's just an old cemetery. What's the worst that could happen?" Jason, Mike's best friend since elementary school, raised an eyebrow. "Famous last words, man. You know that, right?" Despite his skepticism, there was a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He'd never been able to resist one of Mike's crazy ideas. "I think it's cool," Dave said, adjusting the straps of his backpack. He was the quiet one in the group, always more interested in his camera than in social situations. "Urban exploration is trending right now. If we document this, it could blow up online." Emily pushed a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, her blue eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "My grandmother used to talk about this place. She said they stopped using it back in the 1940s when they built the new cemetery on the other side of town. But they never moved the bodies, just left them here and let the forest take over." "That's messed up," Jess muttered, though she made no move to leave. "She also said," Emily continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "that the dead here are angry. They know they've been forgotten, and they don't take kindly to visitors." The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of Emily's words settling over them like a shroud. The forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows between the trees deepening as the sun continued its descent. "Ghost stories," Dave said finally, though his usual certainty wavered slightly. "People always make up stuff like that about abandoned places." "Then why does virtually no one come here?" Jess challenged. "The hiking trails in these woods go everywhere except this spot. Even the town maps don't show it anymore. It's like everyone's trying to pretend it doesn't exist." Mike stepped forward, leading the group into the woods, sneakers crunching on the fallen leaves. "That's exactly why we need to go. Maybe we are the first people in years to actually explore it. We'll take some photos, hang out for a couple of hours, and prove there's nothing to be afraid of. By Monday, everyone at school will know we did it." The rusted iron gates loomed before them, twisted and broken, hanging from hinges that looked ready to crumble into dust. Beyond the gates, the cemetery was barely visible through the dense tangle of overgrown vegetation. Tombstones jutted from the earth at unnatural angles, some leaning so far they seemed ready to topple over completely. Thick vines had wrapped around many of them, slowly pulling them back down into the soil. "Last chance to back out," Jason said, though he was already moving toward the gate. Nobody wanted to be the one who chickened out. Not now. Not with everyone watching. The gate groaned as Mike pushed it open, the sound of protesting metal echoing through the woods like a warning. One by one, they filed through, stepping from the relative openness of the forest path into the oppressive atmosphere of the forgotten cemetery. The change was immediate and unsettling. The air felt heavier here, colder, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees the moment they crossed the threshold. Forest sounds of birds calling, leaves rustling, branches creaking, all seemed muffled and distant, replaced by an unnatural stillness that pressed against their ears. "Is it just me?" Dave said quietly, raising his camera to take a photo. "Or does this place feel wrong?" Nobody answered, but the tension in their shoulders and the way they unconsciously moved closer together told him everything he needed to know. They walked deeper into the cemetery, their footsteps oddly loud in the silence. The tombstones they passed were ancient, their inscriptions worn smooth by time and weather. Some bore dates from the 1800s. Many had no names at all anymore, the dead they marked reduced to anonymous bones beneath forgotten earth. Emily stopped in front of one particularly weathered stone, squinting to make out the faded words. "Here lies Margaret Sullivan, beloved mother, 1827 to 1891. May she rest in. The rest was illegible, lost to decades of neglect. She's been here over 130 years, Emily whispered. And nobody even remembers her name. The weight of that realization hung in the air. Hundreds of people were buried here, each with their own stories, their own lives, their own loved ones who had mourned them. And now they were nothing but anonymous stones slowly sinking into the earth, swallowed by a forest that cared nothing for memory or grief. "This is depressing," Jess said, her earlier bravado completely gone. "Can we just take the photos and leave?" "We've barely been here 10 minutes, Mike protested, though even he seemed less enthusiastic than before. The cemetery seemed to have a way of draining confidence, replacing it with a creeping unease that settled deep in the gut. A sharp crack echoed through the trees, making them all jump. They froze, listening intently. The forest remained silent, but the crack came again, closer this time, like a branch snapping under weight. "What was that?" Jess's voice was tight with fear. "Probably just a deer," Jason offered, though his hand had instinctively reached for Emily's arm. "Or the wind knocking down dead branches." "There is no wind," Dave pointed out. And he was right. The air had gone completely still, with not even a breeze stirring the surrounding leaves. They stood motionless, straining to hear any other sounds. For several long seconds there was nothing. Then, so faint they might have imagined it, came a whisper. It seemed to drift through the air from no particular direction, just a soft murmur that might have been wind through leaves, or might have been something else entirely. "Tell me you heard that," Emily breathed, her eyes wide. "It's just," Dave started to say, but another whisper cut him off, louder this time and unmistakably vocal. It was followed by another, and another, until the air was filled with the sound of dozens of voices whispering at once, though none of them could make out any actual words. "Okay, this is officially creepy," Mike admitted, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Maybe we should." "Where's the gate?" Jason interrupted, turning to look back the way they'd come. Everyone turned. The path they'd walked down, the clear, visible path that had led them into the cemetery, was gone. In its place was an impenetrable wall of trees and undergrowth, as if the forest had closed behind them like a door. "That's not possible," Jess said, her voice rising with panic. "We walked straight. We didn't take any turns. The gate should be right there. We've only been walking for, 15 minutes?" Dave checked his phone for the time, then frowned. "That's weird. My phone says it's 9:47, but we got here at sunset, around 6:30. That can't be right." The others checked their phones. All of them showed the same impossible time, and worse, none of them had any signal, not even a single bar. "Something's wrong," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We need to leave." "Now I'm with her," Jess agreed quickly. "Let's just pick a direction and walk until we find a way out." They started walking, moving faster now, their earlier curiosity replaced by a desperate need to escape. But the cemetery seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Every direction they turned led only to more tombstones, more twisted trees, more shadows gathering in the growing darkness. The whispers were growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from the ground itself, from the graves surrounding them on all sides. And underneath the whispers, they could hear something else. A low, rhythmic sound like breathing, or like the earth itself was alive. "This doesn't make sense," Jason said, fighting to keep the panic from his voice. "The cemetery isn't this big. We should have hit the edge by now." A movement in the corner of Mike's vision made him spin around. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Dave asked, raising his camera. "Something moved, over there between those tombstones." Mike pointed with a shaking hand toward a cluster of graves about 30 feet away. They all stared into the shadows, and for a moment nothing happened. Then they saw it, a shadow darker than the others, moving with purpose, darting from one tombstone to another with unnatural speed. "Oh, hell no," Jess whispered. "Tell me that's a person. Please tell me that's just someone messing with us." But they all knew it wasn't. The shape was wrong. Too tall and too thin, moving in a way that didn't match human. It flickered at the edge of their vision, never quite visible enough to see clearly but impossible to ignore. "We need to run," Emily said, backing away slowly. "Right now." Before anyone could respond, the ground in front of them moved. The soil shifted and bulged as if something beneath it was pushing upward. They watched in horror as a pale, skeletal hand broke through the surface, fingers clawing at the air. Another hand followed, and then another, erupting from graves all around them. "No, no, no," Jess screamed as a corpse pulled itself from the earth, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its skin was gray and stretched tight over bone, its eye sockets empty except for a faint, sickly green glow. Its jaw hung open in a silent scream, and as it fully emerged from the grave, it turned its eyeless gaze toward them. More bodies were rising now, dozens of them, pulling themselves from the soil with horrific determination. Some were nothing but skeletons, their bones clicking and scraping as they moved. Others still had patches of decayed flesh, their funeral clothes hanging in tatters. "Run!" Jason shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her with him. The group bolted, weaving between tombstones and crashing through bushes, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, the dead gave chase. Their movements were impossibly fast, far faster than their broken bodies should have allowed. The whispers had transformed into growls and moans, filling the air with a cacophony of rage and hunger. The cemetery seemed to shift around them as they ran, paths appearing and disappearing, graves multiplying, until it felt like they were running through an endless maze of the dead. Dave stumbled, his camera flying from his hands. Mike hauled him back to his feet without stopping, Dave grabbing his camera as he was pulled up. "There," Emily shouted, pointing ahead. Through a gap in the trees they could see a stone structure, a mausoleum, its walls covered in moss and ivy. Pale light flickered from within, barely visible through the cracks in its sealed door. "That's not the exit," Jess cried, but they had no choice. The dead were right behind them, their decayed hands grasping at empty air just inches from their backs. They ran, trying to run behind the mausoleum, their only hope, but as they got closer, a figure stepped out from behind it, blocking their path. It was tall and impossibly thin, wrapped in a tattered cloak that seemed to be made of shadow itself. Where its face should have been was only darkness, save for 2 points of that same sickly green light burning where eyes would be. "You should not have come here," the figure said, its voice like wind through a crypt, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This place is not for the living." The teenagers skidded to a halt, trapped between the advancing corpses and this new horror. Mike tried to speak, but his voice came out as a strangled whisper. "We didn't mean to disturb anything. We'll leave. We'll never come back. Just let us go." The figure tilted its head, studying them with those burning eyes. "Leave," it seemed to find the word amusing. "There is no leaving. This cemetery has been forgotten by the world above. The dead here were abandoned, left to rot in silence while the living moved on and built new monuments to themselves. They are angry, they are hungry, and now," it gestured with one skeletal hand toward the encroaching corpses, "now they have found something to remember." The ground trembled beneath their feet. All around them more hands were emerging from the soil, more bodies pulling themselves free. The dead were everywhere, surrounding them, cutting off any hope of escape. "Please," Emily begged, tears streaming down her face. "We're sorry. We're so sorry." The figure leaned forward, close enough that they could feel the cold radiating from it like winter frost. "Your sorrow means nothing to the forgotten, but perhaps," it paused, considering, "perhaps you can help them be remembered." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the figure raised both hands. The door to the mausoleum groaned open behind them, revealing not just a tomb but an empty, deep darkness, a void that seemed to swallow light itself. The corpses surged forward with renewed fury, their bony hands reaching, grasping, pulling, forcing them toward the mausoleum door. They used the only opening left, into the mausoleum, into that darkness. The moment they crossed the threshold, the stone door slammed shut behind them with a boom that shook the earth. The last sound they heard was laughter, cold, cruel, and ancient, echoing through the darkness. The cemetery had claimed them.